Hello and welcome to the Conscious Creators Vodcast, where we have extraordinary discussions to empower you to create the story of your life. Each week, you will discover how to overcome painful patterns of mental, emotional, and physical distress, how to drop the mask of your public persona, and revolutionary steps of what you can do to awaken your true health and potential. You have the power to create a new story of your life starting right now. So, what's your story? Have you ever noticed that whenever there's a problem, you are always there? And if you get into the habit of experiencing the same problems for a long period of time, you may even start to identify as the problem and reflect this in your language and how you speak about yourselves. For example, I'm a warrior. I'm always anxious. I'm impatient. Yet it's our perception of our external reality caused by our thinking which creates a perceived problem. I'm your host, Victoria, and welcome to our show. Today, Pete and I will discuss the topic, We Are Not Our Problems, and how our reality and everything we see and feel in the world is a reflection of who we are in our minds. Welcome back, Pete.
Afternoon, Victoria. Afternoon, everybody. Good to be back.
So it's our life experiences and therefore our problems that are shaped by how we feel and think internally. So what if we were to change our thinking to realize that we are not our problems and that it is the problem that is the problem? How different would our lives become then?
Very. in a short word, I think if we make that separation between us and the problem, then no doubt about it, our lives are going to become a lot clearer and a lot more straightforward, because we basically come to understand that there's a difference between us, the experiencer, and the experience that we're having. So, rather than identifying as the problem, such as I am anxious, you can accept that, I guess, in the moment you feel anxious, excuse me, but it's really about making an observation about your reaction to a situation as opposed to becoming immersed within the reaction itself. So that means you kind of avoid moving into like a permanent state of identity and simply experience it as a fleeting moment, if you like. So it's about creating that distance between you and the thing that you're observing.
Right. Because if we keep identifying with the feeling that we experienced in that moment, it then becomes our default emotional reaction, right? And then over time, that will become a problem because that type of thinking limits our possibilities in life. So let's use the problem of anxiety as an example, Pete. I think, because I think many of us can relate to that. So when we get that churning feeling in our stomach and we tell ourselves, oh, I'm anxious again, it will show up in our lives as a problem because it will likely prevent us from moving forward. And so by clinging so tightly to this conditioned view of the world, we're actually limiting our growth and potential in life.
Yeah, I think we are. I think that's definitely the case. Because every time we begin to act from a default state, such as identifying as I'm anxious, then whatever happens immediately after that identification is always going to be focused through the lens of that label. So you can think of it as for example, if you come across something in the future, a future experience that in and of itself may be quite a small thing, suddenly what's going to happen is that will get blown out of all proportion because the way you're viewing it is through the current lens of how you feel and what you're identifying as at that moment. So I think the problem of labeling yourself as anxious in the now is going to have like an impact on your future experiences. So this is always the trade-off and the thing that you've got to be careful about.
So what's interesting then, if we delve a bit deeper, might there be something else, something else that's contributing to or even fueling the problem of being anxious, for example?
Yeah, once again, that's definitely the case. I think there are kind of like two types of problems. You got problems number one, which are the things that just kind of pop up every day, that are just kind of part and parcel of life. And then you've got, I guess, kind of problems number two, which is where something that has been, I guess, created from a deep rooted belief that's been formed around something emotionally intense that happened a long time ago. They're the kind of the bigger issues to deal with. So I think for the purpose of today, we'll focus on problem number two and give that some more attention.
Okay, yeah, and thinking about it, if we look at kind of our familial and societal constructs that we've grown up in, they obviously shape how we start to think and view the world. For example, let's say you grew up in a family or a country that held generations of poverty, you might be fueling the anxiety around certain events that you experience today. And then equally, if you had a one-off experience that was really emotionally intense, then that too could have a similar effect, and how you might struggle to shift out of that pattern.
Yeah. So, as an example, do you remember the time when, for example, you were a little girl and your dad scolded you in public and shouted at you to move out the way? And as a result of that, your problem today is that you feel as if you're always in the way of people, even though the actual catalyst or the initial incident took place 10, 20, 30 years ago, or however long it was. But that's just kind of one method, if you like, by which the problems that we face today are made manifest. So what's happening is that you're finding yourself in a new scenario with new characters, but you're actually acting out the same problem from the program that you created years ago when you had that first, emotional situation. So it's really about understanding the link between what happened then and what's happening now, and how we basically break that link and then start to do the reprogramming process. So we'll get more into that in a second.
Yeah. So in order to break the pattern, you need to transcend it. It makes me think of that quote that Einstein famously said, is that no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So with that said, let's share some tools and techniques then with our audience to help them shift their limiting thoughts and belief patterns.
Mm-hmm.
To you, Pete.
Yeah. So I've kind of got three approaches to kind of go through then today. So the first one is for I guess what we can call stage one problems, right? So one of the keys there would be to seize the moment and consciously be choosing which way you want the course of events to turn out. Because when you make a point of being consciously aware of what you want to happen next, then what you start to find is that life begins to be more on purpose or to work for you, rather than running an autopilot and seemingly be working to you or happening to you. So this is something that I think we've tapped into before, which is the concept of being responsible, right? And we can actually take that a step further. So if there's a time gap between the stimulus that you've had and your response, so for example, let's say someone sends you a text message or someone sends you an email, right? And your initial reaction is like, and you start tapping away. If you just take a moment and just kind of like, reframe and look at what's going on from a different perspective. If you take the position that, okay, hang on, what if life was here to try and elevate me in some way? What if what I'm being exposed to now was a wake-up call and was something to help me say, right, let me take my time, let me think about the best possible answer for this, knowing that this is really here to move me forward. You know, if you were to do that as often as you can, then what you'd find is that the way in which you responded or reacted to these initially seemingly annoying situations are always going to come out that much better for you and the other people involved. So that reframe can be a very, very powerful thing. And ultimately, you know, I think what it helps to do is to stop you from, you know, feeling and being the victim, right? So it's about you taking control and saying, you know, I know what's going on here. I'm going to react and press forward and respond in this way. So that's like, you know, the most simple way to address these problems. So I think for stage 2, which is a little bit more ingrained, shall we say. So stage 2 would be, for example, you kind of like miss the initial opportunity to consciously interact and kind of, you know, stop the chain of events from unfolding. You know, what's going on here is that you've had a few incidents that are starting to build up, and in effect, you're starting to gather evidence, right? And this is what I kind of categorize as the, you know, the C, I knew I was right kind of stage. And really, you know, when you get to this point, what you're actually doing is you're just reinforcing the old storyline that you created, you know, which obviously is underpinned by the old emotional injury.
I told you so, isn't it?
yeah, precisely, right? So when you are able to catch yourself and realize that you're actually acting out this story, you want to make a point of setting a new intention. And that new intention is to say, right, the next time there's, you know, the next episode of this problem, I'm going to react in a different way. You want to literally break the habit that you're starting to get into and say, nope, it's going to be different. So when this, you know, this next point arises, you know, you can say, right, I'm going to be much more nonchalant at that point, or, you know, I'm going to kind of flip it and be intrigued about how, you know, it might turn out, you know, well, okay, I know this is a kind of a point of confrontation, but if I handle it properly or handle it in a certain way, you know, how good could it be in terms of the outcome, right? So just switch it and just change the way in which you're feeling emotionally in that moment, just to make sure it's different from what you've been doing before. And you know, when you do that, it just basically helps you from you know, from continuing along, and well, and who knows where that will go. But,
well, what you said earlier is about that importance of, you know, not reacting straight away, like going into default and just reacting. It's you know, you said that it's important to take that moment to pause if you can, and then from pausing, you know, you start to be able to assess the response, isn't it? What you
that's right.
saying.
That's right. Yeah.
And also, like, you know, rather than slipping into that, you know, kind of doom and gloom, like, oh, why is this happening to me again? You know, we can lighten it a little bit and think, oops, you know, this is showing up again, and it's an opportunity for me to, you know, reframe the problem and choose a new response, as you've been saying.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Victoria, you know, it's like, as we talk about these things, as we go through these things, and as we experience them in our own personal lives, you know, I think at times it's helpful to try and see it as a game as well, right? And now, obviously, I know, depending upon what the nature of the situation is, that can be easier or harder to do, right? But, you know, assuming like it's not a kind of, you know, life or death situation, or a really kind of hardcore thing that you're going through, you know, just take a bit of time, step back, and say, hey, look, you know, let's not be so let's not take ourselves so seriously in these situations, right? You know, it's life's about experience. Everyone's learning here. So, you know, let's just kind of ease up and just, you know, make the outcome as positive as it can be, as quickly as possible. And I think just that little switch at times is also a positive thing to do.
Yeah, I like that. The game of life. It's like
yeah
said earlier about, you know, maybe thinking that whatever's coming your way is actually serving you an opportunity for growth, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So we've gone through, kind of like a stage one solution of problems where you're able to, pretty quickly interject consciously and make a change. We've looked at stage two, which is you kind of missed the first window of opportunity, but you've caught yourself, a little bit down the line. So a stage three situation would be kind of where you've either done one or both of these two approaches, and they're still not working. And so what we really need to be doing here is figuring out, how do we create a new way of behaving? Because if we don't change it, then it could become disastrous if we just let these things roll on and roll on. So in this instance, at the point when you remember to do so, what you want to do is you want to kind of mentally view, you want to create a distance between you, the person now, and the problem that is going on. So what you want to do is you want to see yourself in your mind's eye as if you're looking at like a film screen, and literally you are taking the image, pushing it away slightly, so there is distance between you and what you're looking at. So when you start to look at the film, the screen, what you begin to realize is that the person in that image has been acting the way they have been acting, simply because they haven't had the resources, or the guidance or the insight or whatever it is, to act in the most ideal way to bring the problem to a conclusion as quickly as possible. So what we have to do is reprogram that person in the film.
So what, we're replaying the scene, essentially?
So if I'm not totally clear, please pick me up on it, right? But so it's as if you are seeing yourself playing out like what's happened before, okay? Like as if you're watching a film of yourself. But the reason that you're doing that is you're depersonalizing yourself, right? So you're in effect projecting the problem and the problem person onto a screen, and you're watching it as an observer objectively. So as you're watching, what you want to be doing is, within your actual physical body, is thinking about and embodying and feeling the way that you want to be feeling, and think about the way that you want to be acting the next time that this situation or this problem kind of presents itself. So literally, as you are watching yourself on the screen in the previous scenario that had gone by, you're there thinking about how the new you wants to be. You want to build up those emotions, build up those feelings, anything that you might be hearing, make sure you hear it loudly. Anything you might be seeing, see it vividly. Anything you might be feeling it, really tactfully. And then when you've kind of got to a crescendo, if you like, of these feelings and these emotions, you want to close the gap and you want to float into the image. So rather than you watching yourself on the film, you then go into the you on the film and you step into the film, right? So you then become part of the scene that you were looking at, which means that because you've got those newly programmed ways of being and feeling and acting within you, you can consciously change the way in which you are now reacting in this scene. So what it means is, the old you that was really the problem because of the way that they were reacting, that's now being kicked to the curb, and the new you has stepped in and replaced the problem, and you are acting in a way where you're in control. You're coming from the place that you want to be coming from, and the way in which you're talking, the way in which you're acting, the way in which you're being listened to, the way in which you're being responded to, all of these things are going along in the way that you want them to be going along in order to give you the ideal outcome. So this is exactly what you're doing, right? Exactly what you're doing. So this is a very strong mental process that you go through, and obviously it's also a visceral process too, because you're feeling these things. But it really is. It's like changing the software program, if you like, on a computer, right? And then what you'll notice is that at the point when you actually step into the film, you might actually get like a bodily sensation. You know, it can vary from person to person, right? Some people feel heat. Some people feel like a kind of like electric shock. Some people just feel like really energized. But quite often, there will be like a tangible feeling as the new you steps into what was the old you. And this is a really, really powerful way to break those patterns of behavior, because like you say, you've literally brought a new you to the table. So that was the longest of the 3 approaches. I hope I've made sense, but it's really about initially externalizing the problem, depersonalizing it, putting it onto a film screen. You're observing it. As you're observing it, you think about, this is how I want to be, this is how I want to act, this is how I want to feel, this is how I want to be responded to the next time this happens. You then close the gap, you step in, and the old you is gone, the new you takes over, and here you are in the film situation, acting consciously in the way that you want to act.
Right, yeah. So you're replaying the movie and then re-scripting the scene, essentially.
That's exactly what you're doing. That's exactly what you're doing.
And it reminds me of a quote by there's a famous novelist. I might not be able to pronounce her name, but it's Anais Nin. She says, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. And so essentially what we're saying is, when you change, your life changes.
Totally.
So each moment, we have that moment to change our experience, which is why it's so important to become aware of our default responses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's precisely the reason why, they say, if you want someone else to change, you've got to change yourself. Right? That's exactly what it's all about. It's
the only person you can change, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. that says it all. Yeah. So I think that's a great observation by Anais. Yeah. So great stuff. Anyway, I did a lot of talking there, so I'll just I'll push it back over to you, Victoria. Sorry.
No, well, thank you so much, because I think it's been for me, it's been a real pleasure unpacking this topic with you and revealing some really thought-provoking stuff. And I think, it'd be great for people to, drop us a line and let us know what they got from this.
Yeah. What's the best thing to do you think, for the audience to kind of get in contact?
Well, I'll summarise that in a minute, but it'd be good to know what they took from the examples that were given, and maybe even have a practice putting it into practice.
Yeah.
And feeding back, because we'd really love to hear.
Yeah. I mean, because like all of these things, if you don't, you can sit down and read about what you're supposed to do or what's a good idea to do in a situation, and so you can understand concepts, but if you don't apply the concepts so that they become a reality and an actual working tool, then nothing's going to change.
Right, you've got to embody it. Yeah, exactly what you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just summarise for our audience
yes.
today's discussion. So we discussed how our reality is a reflection of our internal thoughts and feelings. We talked about how many of our problems are often created by false beliefs that we hold about ourselves and possibly others. And we looked at some solutions of how to turn a perceived problem into a possibility for growth and potential. So your question, Pete, how can people join the discussion? They can join our discussion by submitting any comments or questions to our Facebook page, which is the Academy of Conscious Creators, where we will answer your questions in our weekly live short answer session, which will be next Wednesday at 7 p.m. So do tune in for that. And if you feel like you need to jump on this now, contact us via our website, which is www.wearetac, which is TACC.com, to discuss a coaching program just for you. And do tune in next week. Do tune in next week. For next Wednesday at 8 p.m, where we're going to explore how to deconstruct and de-story our stories. So we'll see you then.